I hate being the reason people have to send a follow-up email. So
you're so good. I appreciate that. No, that's amazing. But yeah, you are officially my third interview. And happy MLK Day. Thank you for doing this on the day of Dr. King. You know what I mean? Making this happen. We're doing the good
doing
work.
Something for the Black community on Martin Luther King Day. That feels good.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We're doing the good work right now.
You know,
that's what it is. That's what it is. So I am going to give you a little bit of like just kind of like some information to give you some context to things, right? Before we kind of dive in to the questions, because I think that a little context will be helpful, right? For one, if it's good to know, because some people have asked that, like, we are recording this on video, but it's really just so we can see each other's faces, because what a rare opportunity. But mostly it's going to be the audio that's going to be used, and not in its entirety, but most likely like excerpts from the audio that we'll compile. And we're still not sure exactly how we're going to present the information. And just so you know that the information, this research is primarily for the village community. The idea is that we're tapping into, experts and folks from the field like yourself who, can share with us their personal experiences and their thoughts, their ideas, their visions for the future and a space like this. But then we're going to then share that information with the village community and the folks that are really kind of involved within this process, the design process for the Futures Gallery. Excuse me. Hold on. It's a tickle. For the Futures Gallery, so that they can then apply that research to the final design, Of course, the village is working with architects and designers that are going to be really the ones doing the heavy lifting with the design aspect. But of course, because it's designed to serve the community is so deeply involved, And then the other thing is that it's important to understand that this is a project in its early phases, and we are calling it Art as Emergent Response, Artist Space as Emergent Response, the Futures Gallery, really as a placeholder. It doesn't mean that this place is going to be defined by what we might typically think of as a gallery space, because I think that we're looking at this to be so much more than that. And so as you
in the write-up, it seemed like it's really like broad.
Exactly.
And very community-centered, which I know is very central to everything you do. So keep going.
Exactly. So for the idea of the gallery, I think it was really just a placeholder to get folks thinking that, yes, this is an art space and there will be artworks exhibited, but we don't want to think of it as a typical gallery, particularly because, right now, when we think about the idea of emergent response and really just response to the world in general and what we have all had to face in the last couple of years alone, it means that, in this day and age, particularly at the heart of the village, where the village has been such a community hub for so many different reasons, people turn to the village for not just for the arts and for education, but really for community support, sometimes for conflict resolution, sometimes for like hope and healing and all these things. So the idea is that we want this space to embody and have the capacity to hold all those things too. So that's that. And then what else? I think that's it for like the general kind of just like additional information. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by asking you just some general questions that I can feed you. What I can say too is that because we're going to be editing this, like we can take a pause. You can totally take time to think of your responses if you want to, and we can also just treat this as a casual conversation, because I want you to also like use your imagination. Like it's not just about tapping into your expertise and your personal experiences at a museum or an institution that you've worked in, but maybe thinking about the institution that you might work in yourself in the future and what kind of space you would want that to be. And then also kind of thinking about Philly, because I know you're no longer in Philly, but you've been here, and so you're familiar with, the kind of culture and the, just the energy of the city and even of North Philadelphia and all the things that the village has represented and offers. So we can think about that space for the future in that context too, because you know, the future, who knows what it holds, but we're trying to use our imaginations and our speculative lenses to think about that. So yeah, one of the warm-up questions I've been asking folks is just kind of, you know, what brought you to the world of the arts? Like, you know, you could have done a lot of things. We all kind of have a moment where we're thinking about our career path and, you know, what moves us and why we're here on this planet, and thinking about, for yourself, what is that for you? What brought you to the art world?
Well, high school, I took an AP art history class. So I'm going to give you the short version of the story. But when I was in high school, I played varsity soccer. And the soccer coach was also the art teacher, and she taught AB art and IP art and AP art history. And so she said, Alexis, next year you're going to take my AP art history class. Here's the summer reading list. See you next semester. And I was like, all right, coach. I took the class. I loved the class. And at the end of it, I was 50. It was my sophomore year of high school. I was 15. At the end of the class, my family, we took like a week trip to New York. I went to the Met for the first time. And I got to see so many of the artworks that I loved in the actual museum that I learned about in class. It really excited me and invigorated me. And from that moment of being, I guess, about to be a junior in high school, I said, okay, no matter what I do, when I get to college, I'm at the very least going to minor in art history. And then when I got there, I realized that I loved it a lot more than what I was studying. And I switched my major. And from age 19, I was like, okay, I'm going to be a curator someday, whatever that, you know, pans out to be. 27 now, I'm doing it. So
from age 19, you knew what you wanted to do?
I'm an extremely decisive person. I don't have problem making decisions.
Clearly, that's amazing. No, that's amazing. That's rare. You know, that's rare. I don't know about that. I don't know if I'd call it a downfall. Look at you now, and then look at you.
No, I'm saying that's not my downfall, making decisions.
Oh, that's not your thank you. Yes. Thank you for clarifying, because no. I love a decisive human being. That's amazing.
Yeah, I just really loved it. And the reason I actually ended up in contemporary art was when I was in school, I always thought of myself more as a modernist, but I ended up in contemporary because when I was at the St. Louis Art Museum, I co-curated my first show, and it was all about abstraction, all about Black artists. And I got to meet a handful of the artists that were in the show, and it completely shifted my focus. And that's how I ended up in this contemporary vein. So that's kind of the short version.
Wow, that's amazing. So, okay. And so then what would you say is the last, like in real life, like you actually visit an art space, whether it was a gallery or an outdoor installation? What was your last art experience like especially during this time, during this pandemic?
Well, because I've been working in a museum the entire pandemic, 2 different ones,
right? I
can cheat and say that the most recent thing I've seen is the current museum that I'm at. And the museum is actually going through a whole construction phase, much like your space. And so we're about to do a big traveling show of like all of the hits of the collection. I don't know if that's classified, actually. Let me not talk about it. But anyway, I'm like learning this new collection right now. What I saw before that, I don't even remember. Oh, you know what? Over the summer, I went to New York and I got to see the David Hammond's body print show the same time that the Sengen and Goody show that I worked on at the Philadelphia Museum of Art was on view, and they were friends and colleagues there.
Oh, wow.
And I got to see like all his body prints from like 70s and 80s and all of this kind of stuff. And it was like really exciting to kind of see the ways that artists of the same generation like think together and just the different techniques that they use. And, you know, it was a really exciting show. And, you know, the catalog had essays from Senga and other artists from that time. So kind of seeing how they all work together. And in that same vein, after I left Philadelphia, I hadn't seen the Ulysses Jenkins show at the ICA. So I went back to, you know, tie up some loose ends in Philadelphia, and I went back to see that show. And they were also kind of in that same circle. Ulysses Jenkins is also good friends with Sengen and Goody. I think their birthdays are like a day apart or something. And to see like so many of these, and to see some of these videos that people had never seen before. And apparently it was like it's his first retrospective. So I guess that was really exciting. And in terms of how you feel in a museum or gallery space, they had these like bean bags on the floor in the viewing rooms for the larger videos.
Mm-hmm.
And it really was way more immersive than like the little benches that people usually have, because they had big bean bags. You could get really comfortable. You sit there, we're all, of course, in our masks, but you can
That's
really
nice.
kind of take it in. And I really enjoyed
Yeah.
that type of presentation where it felt more relaxed. So yeah, that was a good
No,
choice.
I love that. And, you know, we're talking about the future now, you know, like this
Yeah.
is, we're calling it the Futures Gallery, but, you know, the Village has been here for like 30 plus years, you know?
Yeah.
So thinking 30, I mean, you know, and 30 years ago, gosh knows, we've come like light years in so many ways from that past. And
Yeah.
thinking about the future, and like so many things could be possible, right? Because even right now we're taking civilians up to, you know, outer space on like commercial spaceships and stuff.
Yeah.
So like, you know, and you just never know. And then of course we're dealing with climate change and pandemics and the whole 9 yards, civil unrest and racial injustice is just, you know, all the things. But so when it comes to the art world and that industry, which was so, you know, that field was so impacted, you know, I mean, so many people lost jobs.
So many people lost jobs, had to change fields.
Yeah, it had to change fields. And then at the same time, other opportunities opened up, you know what I mean? Because in thinking about that list of folks that you were on, that was brought to my attention on like, I'm on this thread with like some folks from, you know, Philly, who I've worked with, many of which you know, and like, you know, someone shared the thread, it might have been Damon Reeves, I think, who shared it because, you know, Damon's on the list as well.
Oh yeah.
And
you know what was exciting about that list?
Yeah, tell me what was exciting for you?
First of all, I'm looking through the list and it's like a lot of people that I look up to, a lot of people who I've worked with or I've met, or people I really like, people I'm friendly with. And then Felicia Rashad is on the list because she's now the dean of art.
I saw that, right, for Howard.
Like, in what universe am I on the same list with that woman? It really like made me laugh. And it was such a like a very cool, surreal moment. But yeah, it's a good list of fantastic people. I was excited.
Yeah, and it's comprehensive. I mean, it really, I mean,
it's global.
It's global. It was really fantastic to see. And like you, like, I was just like, I would just go down and I'm like, I know that person, or I've met that person, or I've worked with this person, and, you know, or I'm friends with this person, or I dearly, you know what I mean? It's just like, wow. So, I mean, so even though, you know, we are dealing with so much hardship and trauma and threats and fears about the future, there are also some positive things, some breakthrough moments that folks are having in the art world, particularly curators and artists and art administrators of color. So, you know, but thinking about what are the concerns? Like, we're kind of moving through this wave of things right now. But what concerns you about the art world and its future, like the evolution of it, and the survival of the art world in the future? What concerns you most?
I mean, just the kind of sustainability of it. I mean, the kind of person that even goes into the profession of an artist or an art administrator or a curator or an art educator, just, you know, especially in this time of turmoil, when, to use an example, so many art educators lost their jobs, you know, which is such a pivotal point of connection to the art world when you're talking about community spaces, you know, definitely concerns me. Or just the way, especially in recent years, Black artists and Black art shows, as important as they are, often kind of used as this like gimmick to show how an institution is like doing well because they have a Black artist on the forefront of the playbill, you know? And even when they do that, they don't even get necessarily the best gallery space, whether they're, even if they're deserving of it. And so the way that the art world kind of moves and shapes itself, and who it privileges to show their work, who it privileges to work at the institution, definitely concerns me. So a space like this, when I was reading the write-up, it was saying, you know, art, career training programs for art handlers and other people in the art profession. And that really excited me because I have been working in museums from internships to now since about like 2014. And I've never met a Black art handler.
Right. Isn't that
ever.
exciting? Like that's one of the things about this project that folks are so excited about
Yeah.
because of this rare opportunity to tap into, you know, a profession and, you know, a career path in art handling that you rarely see folks of color pursue, you know,
Yeah.
or even have access to, you know what I
Yeah.
mean, in terms of that education that you're talking about, you know. So this is, I think, that aspect is probably one of the things that makes this project so special. And also too, when
And
we talk about sustainability. No, go ahead.
it's not even just art handling though. Like there's so many jobs in a museum that you don't necessarily need to have like a deep art background to do, but in doing it, you could gain that information and you can gain that connection. Like if you work in construction in a museum, or like there's just so many other areas, you know, lighting
Right.
design, all of these different things, exhibition design, all these things you could do that are kind of not in the necessarily the norm of what people when they think of arts careers, but these are careers you could have for a long time, you could do, and people just don't know about it. And I think that's really exciting that, you know, this is going to be a space that kind of educates people and opens them up to a different, wider range of interesting, you know, job choices.
No, exactly. And like you said, you know, this one opportunity, this one kind of skill set, right? Like around art handling could, like you said, lead to other things, you know. I think it's really just the beginning, but it's
Oh
a great
yeah.
place to start, right? It's a great place to start. So we're going to get started. What we're going to do is just kind of like run down kind of like a brief bio profile information, just so that we have it on record, you know, as in on the audio, in terms of your name, where you're from, and where you are now.
Sure.
And maybe even a few bio highlights. So when I say that, I mean like anything like your past projects. You mentioned a couple shows that you've curated, anything that comes to mind from your past projects, current or future, that you feel might relate to what we're doing today with the
Sure.
Futures Gallery, okay? And if you forget anything, I'll just feed you the questions, but we could start with your name, where you're from, and kind of where you're patching in from.
Sure. So my name's AlexisAssam. I'm currently based in Richmond, Virginia, almost 4 months here now, and I'm working at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. I'm from South Florida, like the Fort Lauderdale area, and I left Florida when I was like 22, went on to St. Louis, Missouri, because I got a fellowship at the St. Louis Art Museum, which is where I got to co-curate my very first show, The Shape of Abstraction, Selections from the Ollie Collection, which was a collection based project. A fantastic Black collector named Ron Ollie donated a collection of like 181 works of art by Black artists, abstract photographs, abstract art, photographs, drawing, sculpture, works on paper, all of it, and did this fantastic show about abstract art from like the 50s to the present day. And that really shifted my focus, like I was saying earlier, to the contemporary art world. From there, I got a fellowship at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, where I was for 2 years. I just left in September, October of 2021. And I worked in the contemporary art department, and I got to work on some really fantastic shows where I was the fellow, which meant that I assisted the assistant curator on everything. And the biggest and most exciting project was Senga Ngugi Topologies. And it was the fourth and final international venue for this show by Senga Ngugi, who's a fantastic conceptual artist, sculptor, and got to work with her on that. We really expanded the show from where it had been in previous iterations and added installations and sculptures that weren't in the previous versions. So that was really exciting. Got to do, you know, kind of artist talks with her other artist co-collaborators, and that was really just a fun learning moment, hearing about their experiences, the time that, you know, I wasn't on this earth, kind of hearing
Right.
what came before, and, you know, all how relevant all of it is now. And then that led me to my new role at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, where I'm now the, what is my title? It's long. I am the Virginia A. Perry Assistant Curator of Global Contemporary Art. So I work in
Wow.
the, I know. So I work in the modern and contemporary art department with two really like brilliant women, and working on, a few things that are kind of in production now. So, like I said, I've been in this role for not even 4 months now. So, learning collection, coming up with ideas for the future. We're about to undergo a big construction project. So that has a lot of details that are going to affect our department and our gallery spaces and our collections. So,
Right.
yeah. So
Wow.
I know.
That's a lot. That's a lot. And like you
I've been
said, what are you,
busy.
27?
27. Oh, and I guess I should probably also say I went to school at Florida State University, which is where I majored in art history, both undergrad and grad. And what else should I say about that? I learned a lot. I'm here now, so worked out.
Yeah, I think it worked out. I think something's telling me it worked out for you. It's working out, and but it's just the beginning. I mean, you've done so much, but I know this is really just the beginning, and I can't wait to see what comes next, So I'm glad that you got to read a little bit about the project. We don't have too much on the project because, like I said, it's really just the beginning phases of this. And we're still shaping what it's going to be. And so the core questions that I did send in that initial email, we're really going to be kind of exploring those in whatever way organically kind of works for us, in this conversation, because while everyone is being asked those same overarching questions, I feel that so far, the subset of questions is going in different directions based on different folks' experience and their interests and just their ideas about the future. Everybody's different. So starting with the first one, which was, how do we create a gallery that holds space for the past, the present, and the future,
Yeah.
And I think that we are all thinking about, especially as folks of color, this idea of, our own traditions, African traditions, for example, and thinking about the idea of Sankofa, right, kind of comes up. And that has kind of been a theme in Afrofuturism, because again, we're talking about the future, but that is something that relies on going back to our past, to our history, in order to kind of see where we can go, the possibilities that we, that are there for us in the future. And wondering, what are your thoughts on a space? Yeah, go ahead.
From what I have read and what you've told me in this conversation about the exhibition space, about the kind of whole space in general, it sounds like it is thinking especially about the future, especially with this program to educate people for the job market, and for the exhibition space itself and the gallery. You said it's not really traditional galleries. Does that mean there's going to be artwork on display, but it's not on sale? Is it, are the...
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I think it is really more, I think of it more like a museum, to be honest.
Okay. Okay.
The vibe that
a gallery with a collection.
Right. But and it doesn't necessarily have to be like a museum that's collection based. But the idea of I do think the idea of a living archive is something that is coming up in these conversations, but also it has come up with the folks at the Village, because I have had some initial meetings with the core community of the Village and some of the staff, and the idea that, as I mentioned, the Village has so much history already, 30 plus years of doing arts programming in the city, and being there in that neighborhood in North Philly, and the idea of, what kind of memory a space like that holds for that community. How can that memory be recorded, be archived, and then how can we use the arts as a way of documenting things as well, And so I think that while certain models, that think about sustainability from an economic standpoint might include a means of presenting artwork and selling it, what I mean, as a traditional gallery might do. But I really think that the works that are going to be displayed, the exhibitions that will be curated are really, I would say, leaning more towards the creative expression, towards even more the didactic nature of work that can raise awareness to certain issues. Because again, the Village has always been focused on the needs the interests, the hopes, the concerns of the community. And so,
Yeah.
and using the art to support that, to support that expression and the unpacking of some of these things that, folks are dealing with on the daily. And then also a way of visioning our way out of all that,
Yeah.
into a more hopeful future, right?
Yeah.
So
Well,
these are all the things.
if the gallery space is going to function both as a community space, as a learning space, as a space to archive the past of the foundation that this space has already been built on, I mean, it sounds like you've got the past, present, and future kind of covered in the way that you have structured it. You know what I mean? And thinking about the space as a community, I mean, there's so many like different types of programming that can happen there, especially if you're thinking about community issues, if you're thinking about global issues, if you're thinking about Black issues, all of these intersect. And, having community conversations, having artist talks with artists who focus on these particular topics in the arts, all of these things to have the space as a center for conversation. If it's not a traditional gallery space all of the time and the artwork is not always on sale, art really as a center for this conversation is a really exciting thing. It almost sounds like it can be like an art therapeutic kind of space, people talking through kind of the issues that these problems in the world bring up. So I think you guys really got it covered. Sounds to me.
No, but that's a great point. I mean, and I think you're right that, the village is already doing this, has already done this, with their exhibitions, with their campus, with their art gardens, and, which are really sacred spaces for the community for that, for hope and healing and kind of like processing all that is life and the things that challenge us, as individuals and as a collective community. So you're right. I do agree with you there. But then also maybe thinking of it from, this perspective, the fact that, you have traveled and seen so many institutions from the inside, right?
Sure.
And from the outside, but the idea that, of the institutions that you've seen in your experience so far, are there any that speak to you or you recall that really had some signs or indicators that they were ready for the future? Like any spaces that maybe you felt were really forward thinking, extremely progressive and future minded? And what did they look like on the inside and the outside? Like what were some of those indicators that they were kind of geared towards a future that, is still unfolding, but the future nonetheless?
So let me kind of explain a little detail about me. I have worked only in art museums. I did a short stint in a history museum one time, 2 months. Wasn't for me. So I think that art museums as like the institution are very different than community-centered gallery spaces. All of that kind of exciting work that you're talking about, I feel like in the museum, art museum, like big art museum space, a lot of that happens in the education department, which is not where I have been kind of centered. So all of that kind of imagining and community organizing and community involvement, all of that happens in that space. And I have not been super active in that space. And I've also never worked in a gallery. So I've only ever gone to galleries, and the kind of galleries I feel like I've gone to are like, your blue chip galleries, New York, or smaller galleries that maybe a little bit more community minded, but that is not like something I have seen a lot of. And when you think of, places that are really envisioning a world for the future through what is on display at the museum and through what they are imagining and envisioning and doing, I don't know if I have experienced that in this very nice way that you are envisioning this space.
Right. So what I'm hearing you saying is that, like, institutions are very much seated in the past, in history, and they don't always reflect the future, right?
No.
They do tend to struggle with that. I will recognize that too, that even in the ones that are now undergoing all these renovations and, the PMA being one of them, and other places that are, trying to keep up with the times, but
Yeah.
nonetheless, right? It's just like, it's kind of undeniable that when you enter them, they still feel institutional, you know? They
Yes.
they still feel like these, I don't know if fossil is the right word, but these
Yeah,
ideas of
there's a
like,
bit of that.
yeah, there's a bit of that, like, you know, because they just feel like
And I think
artifacts, you
it
know,
really
like,
matters. I think one thing that really matters is, how people feel, even first off, feel comfortable coming to the space. So it sounds like the space you're describing, the history that it has, the way that it's moving forward with this new construction project and this new gallery space, it sounds like it's a place that people like to go to, feel comfortable going to, and like want to be there to experience what's going on. And for the museum world, the museum that I'm at now, I feel like people really like going there. One, because it's a free space. It's
mm,
open 365. It's always free. Um, PMA is not like that. It's like 20 something dollars to get in. It's free sometimes. It's like pay what it's I don't think it's ever free. I think it's pay what you wish some days a week. It's
right.
this, big kind of behemoth. People are very intimidated by it. And I think that is number one, the first obstacle. So a space that everyone feels comfortable going to, that you don't have to pay to get in, or it's not some kind of exorbitant price to enter, is one big thing.
Mhm.
And also, kind of, I think the other thing, to get people there to imagine a future together, to plan for that kind of space, it really has to be a space where people are doing things there that people are interested in.
Right. Which was really
So
one of my next questions. The idea of like,
yeah,
so what kind of activities
yeah,
would you like to see in a space of the future that is along the lines of what we're talking about for the village? Like,
yeah,
what do you imagine seeing and experiencing as a visitor there?
yeah. Mm. I mean, I love a good artist talk.
Right. Don't
I
we? We
do.
love the artist talks.
Um, but what else? I don't know, like community conversations of what they want for the space that they are a part of.
Mhm.
Um, what else? Um, I'm trying to think if there's anything that I've experienced, like something new that I've never experienced at art museum before, like, or a gallery space before. I don't know, because,
Right.
art making for all ages is something that, I've enjoyed at a variety of different spaces, and reacting to what I see in word or in art or any of that, or,
So like the
film
idea of being
screenings,
interactive, like workshops
interactive things.
and
Yeah.
interactivity, right? So
Yeah.
that you can engage with the art. So you're not just looking
Yeah.
at art and experiencing it, but you can engage. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's always a fun thing
And
to
also
like,
something about gallery spaces, you said this is going to be a non-traditional space, but sometimes when you enter gallery spaces and there's no text about what you're looking at, and you're kind of just, you walk in and you enter and you're kind of expected to just know what you're seeing, I think can be a barrier for a lot of people, because they feel like if you don't know what you're looking at, then you shouldn't be there.
right.
Um,
This
But
is
I've
true.
also heard, people say that they like to just kind of experience things as they are. But I feel that
Mhm.
having no kind of explanation, no kind of understanding of what you're seeing, makes people kind of feel uncomfortable. I don't know.
Yeah, you need a little bit of some guidance, you know,
Yeah.
and sometimes that can be optional. Like I think
Yeah.
that, you know, it doesn't have to be forced on folks who might
No,
want to take a more
you can ask
independent,
for it. Yeah.
yeah, freeform path through the
Yeah.
gallery space, but others who actually want to be more informed
Yeah.
and supported in their experience, right? I think, but I think you're right. It's like in the same way that this world, everything can be customized and
Yeah.
personalized, you know? I'm wondering, like, even in my own thinking as we're having this chat right now, that like, what would it look like if you could kind of choose your own adventure in a gallery space or a museum space to think about, you know, what you have the appetite for in that moment, you
Yeah.
know, and what kind of options might be available to you, so that you could create your own experience, you know, according to what you like and what your interests are and how you know, because everyone also has different modes of learning and
Mm-hmm.
different ways of, you know, experiencing artwork. And like you said, levels of comfort.
Yeah.
People have different levels of comfort with the way that they engage. And so if that could be customized to each individual in some way, that would be something of the future, because that would be
Yeah, but
a challenge.
like that's a lot. Well, that's a lot of work.
That's a lot of
Um,
work. Yeah.
that's a lot of work. So what is that? That's okay. You go into a gallery space. There's an exhibition on view, and okay, maybe if you want to allow for a duality of experiences or multiplicity of experiences, instead of having traditional text on the wall, maybe you have like a handout or like a PDF that people can read later, right? So
Mhm.
they can experience it, but they can also read it in their own time.
Right.
You could have like for every, let me say it's a solo show, you have an artist kind of video interview off to the side so people can feel like they can engage with who the creator is and what their envisioning was for what they're talking about, or talk with the curator of, you know, why they put the show together this way. I
Yeah.
guess there could, but I mean, this is an idea of like anything you want to engage with is there. So then for every show, there's a space where you can go and like react in word or in art making, or, you know, leave your kind of comments, you know, for
Right.
the people that work in the space so that they can engage with how you reacted and felt. And, you know, having a space where you could have any possible experience. I don't know how
Right.
sustainable that is.
Right.
It's a wonderful thought. They could go in and kind of experience any version of programming or any version
Right.
of response.
Well, that versatility is also something that should be considered, I guess, on your side of the fence, as far as like as curators and operation, like folks that are handling the operations of a
Yeah.
museum. Because when we think about the future and we think about all the things that we've had to face in the light of this pandemic, you know, and things that have had to been adjusted and altered and
Yeah.
modified according to the change in audience and accessibility,
Hmm.
our ability to move through spaces safely and
Yeah.
securely, all these things. So even maybe just starting from that point, what are some of the ways that you've had to adjust, or even your teams, you know, your museum staff have had to adjust at the various institutions you've worked in? Because like you
Yeah.
said, you've recently made the switch, but you can speak probably from the perspectives of both institutions of how they have had to course correct in the midst of a pandemic and still provide these art experiences for visitors. How have
I
you
think
done
one
that?
of the I think one of the biggest things is just digital programming, you know, having all of these lectures and talks and kind of experiences online, is something I had never really done before. And, you know, since the pandemic, I've done multiple versions of that, whether
Mhm.
that's a lecture or a kind of short talk about, you know, what's on view, or talking
Mhm.
with an artist about what their exhibition is about and, you know, kind of their history and their career. So that has been great in the sense that I'm sure you've experienced this as well, being able to tune into things that are outside of your own community. Like, still, of course, it caters to anyone who is in the area, but being able to, you know, attend things that are global or reach a global audience has been a very different thing. So people can really tune into what's going on in a certain city or
Right,
region that they've never even visited before.
right.
Like, I went to a bunch of programs at the Hammer, like during the beginning of the pandemic. I've never been to California.
I mentioned the Hammer in my last chat was something because I love the Hammer. And the thing
They've been
about
doing
the Hammer
stuff.
that was cool, because I was finishing up my coursework in Santa Barbara, so but I was
Yeah, yeah,
living in
yeah.
LA, and you know, the Hammer had concerts, the Hammer had
Yeah,
films, the Hammer
yeah.
had talks and workshops, you know, gallery exhibitions,
And they
like you
have
name
hard
it.
talks too. They don't just have like here's an artist and I'm gonna talk about what their work
No,
is.
they're
They
academic with
also,
good talks.
yeah, they also have conversations like, okay, here's a real issue in the art world right now. Here's a real issue in the world right now. Let's
Yeah.
discuss it. And I'm like, wow.
Right. Oh, you mean those kind of like, right, those
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
candid
yeah.
conversations. No, they do. They do those as well. And that's what I'm saying. It's like, and the thing that also is interesting about the Hammer is that they have this open courtyard kind of thing. Because again, it's LA, so the weather is very different. But I would imagine that in Virginia that you might have a little bit of wiggle room with the seasonal changes and shifts that you could do more outdoor programming year round.
Yeah.
What's the temperature there right now? It's cold.
Cold. It snowed yesterday and it snowed again at like 2 a.m. It's 39 degrees right now and it's supposed to snow again in an hour.
Oh, well, maybe I take that back. Maybe Virginia's not exactly, you know what I mean? I think about Virginia.
As a Florida girl, it's not my favorite.
Right. So, but then again, though, but a space like in Florida, is more open to
have year-round programming.
Yeah. Right. But have a lot of things shifted to outdoors did you do any outdoor programming or attend any during the pandemic as far as art institutions? No. Well, did you get to check out Staying Power, the project at the Village? It was hosted at the Village. The project of Monument Lab. Yeah, but it was pretty cool because, I took one of my classes from Moore to see Staying Power, and we caught it right before it closed. But just the idea that you could go and do a tour outdoors and do things safely, because that was at the time when
it's always nice.
I don't think folks were vaccinated. I don't think we were.
Oh my gosh.
You know what I mean? It was just like, the fear was still in the air about how we were going to
I'm still scared.
Yeah, look, me too. Me too.
That's
why, I'm with you.
I don't want to get on a tangent, but I'm not trying to get a virus, a deadly anything. I know so many people who are kind of in this space now. I'm only going to talk about this for 30 seconds. We're in this space now where they're like, oh, well, everybody's going to get it eventually. And I'm like, I don't want to be one of them. Sorry.
I know. It's just like,
I want to be the last.
I want to be one of the last.
To yourself. Don't push it on me.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
I'm going to keep hiding out.
I know. And it's getting easier to do because for me too, I got a bunch of home tests during the holidays because I was just like, I live alone and I'm just like, I did not want to spend another winter isolated by myself because everyone was afraid to come visit. And I said, well, if I get these home tests, like, then
you'll always know.
Yeah, I could test my friends and say, hey, look, you come in, we'll wear our masks until we finish this test. We're in 15 minutes. If everybody's in the clear, we can hang out. You know what I mean? And everybody's good. So no, I know we got to move forward. And that's the thing is that the art world is moving forward too. We know that
it's going back and forth. It's going back and forth.
Right. There's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Yeah. But I think what people are realizing is that they're having to build in contingency plans and, crisis plans to figure out, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to navigate?
And how to keep their audiences engaged, So I think moving forward, there's always going to be an integration of the virtual into the programming of any institution if it wants to stay relevant and successful and have their audiences engaged. But like you said, like having spaces that are outdoors where you can do outdoor tours and always having that accessible is a fantastic element as well. But yeah, I don't think I attended any during 2020. So
you didn't attend any
outdoor things.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And that's the thing, is that we have to really think about how we're going to build these things into the planning. So that, like you said, there's always going to have to be a digital or a virtual option. If there can't be an outdoor option, even something you mentioned about the audiences and just like the idea, this has come up a lot as far as time tickets and, how many people, because, remember, I don't know if you ever attended Brooklyn Museum's like first Saturday events. I mean, thousands of people, like all over the place.
I went one Saturday over the summer.
This past summer?
When there was the Lorraine O'Grady show was up. And it was a Saturday and they were having the, that whole Saturday event.
I didn't know they were still doing that.
They were still doing it and it was a lot of people and I was like, that's crazy. So I was in my mask and I was like, I'm going past the crowds. I'm just gonna go.
Well, but let me tell you a little something, okay, Alexis? Let me tell you something. Like when I was back in New York, and the Brooklyn Museum, I'll never forget one of the shows. They did I did a tour in the Egyptian galleries.
Yeah.
With like, you know, I had my little like my Britney Spears like walkie-talkie thing on, and I was given the microphone, and it was just like thousands of people. And then there was a dance party there. It's
Oh
just
my
like
gosh.
those times are, I mean, that's the
It's a lot.
past. You know,
Yeah.
that's those days are
Yeah.
over.
Yes
Where you
and
can
no,
gather
though.
like that, you know?
Yes and no, because you know how many concerts there have been in the last year?
Well, look, yes, but
People are still doing things,
you and
even if
I are
they
not
shouldn't do
there.
things.
Look,
No.
well, that's what I'm saying. That's the hard part, is that what are the risks? What kind of you know, risks are we taking in order to engage in these experiences and have
Yes.
them? And I think that like for some of us, like you and I were saying, that like you're still a little nervous, a little scared, have
Yeah.
fears about this virus. I'm not attending concerts, you know.
No.
And so while some people might be gathering and doing that, like for me, that era, well, definitely the era where you can just do it freely and safely without thinking about it, that
You're
era is gone.
always gonna think about it now.
Yeah, now you can go, but you're still going to be thinking about it, and it's still going to be potentially a life or death situation,
Yeah.
you know, for some, you know, especially for
Yeah.
those who are more vulnerable. So the
Yeah.
idea of, you know, limited capacity, time tickets, you know, and then, I mean, right now, what's the average run for an exhibition? Whether the ones you've curated, the ones you're familiar with, I mean, what's the duration for the actual run of the exhibit?
I feel like anywhere from like 3 months to a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
It just depends. It depends on what it is. So like for sometimes like a special exhibition, it could be 3 months, it could be 6 months.
Right,
For more permanent gallery space, more like a year to 2 years or
right,
more. Um, but it really ranges on how big your space is, one, how many things you want to have on view in you know, a year. Like you want to have quarterly like shows, do you want to have,
right.
you know, more than that? You know, it just depends on your workload and how many people work there and what can be done. So it really ranges based on the space
And then
and
what would
the
you say would be the average time for the conception, like the development of an exhibition, as a curator, from your perspective, the curatorial process, like, and not just the run of the show, as you were talking about just now, the 3 to 6 months or the extended year to year and a half. What's the time for the development, you know, and that includes the research, you know, the securing of the works, you know, from various collectors and whatnot in collections,
I would
to
say
all that.
you need at least a year
It's a year, huh?
for anything of size, at the
Yeah.
very least. When we when I was at the Philadelphia Museum of Art and we worked on the Sengen and Goody show, that was a traveling show. So technically it had a set number of works and there was material that went along with it, but we added a lot to it. And
Right.
it was in our largest gallery space, which is Doran's Gallery, that you have to get the paid tickets for, like separate from the
From the general admission.
from the general admission. Thank you. And we put that together in 9 months. And even for a traveling show, that was not enough to like, did we do it? Yeah.
Yeah.
But at what cost did we do it? Stress.
Right.
And that was a very large square footage space. So I think really for anything, especially if you're going to get a lot of loans for it, at the very
Right.
least you need a year from beginning of research to the day that it opens. And
Right.
in an ideal world, if you're really putting together something substantial and not just like here's something, like if you're really like research heavy kind of thing, like 2-3
Right.
years. If you're doing something kind of smaller and you're kind of, you know, these are artists in the community who are working now and you know them already and they've already been involved with the space, could use less lead time, like 6 months or 8 months or something. But it always takes a lot of leeway
But
for
it takes a
research for any
while.
show. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And do you typically work on any kind of publication or catalogs or things that are in conjunction with the exhibition?
I haven't. I've done that once, but I wasn't like the lead author for it. I was like a contributor.
Right.
So yeah, that always takes, from what I've seen, obviously that of course takes longer because then you need a publisher, you need editing time. How many contributors are there going to be? Is it only you producing it? All of that. So that add an extra year for anything like that.
Right, an extra year almost, isn't it true? Yeah, because I wrote an essay for something and I just couldn't believe how long it was taking.
Sure.
And I was just a contributor, but it took a while. But to the point of you're talking about just the capacity of an institution, not just in terms of the space and the walls, but also just the staff. One of the questions I've been asking folks is that, what do you think are the essential roles or will be the essential roles for a museum or a gallery of the future? And more so, we're thinking an institution or a space similar to what we're talking about for the Futures Gallery for the Village, not like a PMA, or a Met, but when we think about the Futures Gallery for the Village, what would you think would be the essential roles that a space like that we could see operating 30 years down the road would need to have, like a core skeleton staff? Who would be the essential players?
Director, at least one curator who can also be collections manager, like a dual role there.
Right, a lot of multiple hats being worn.
Oh yeah, and a gallery space, in a smaller space, you always need that.
Yeah.
You're definitely gonna need educators, not just one. I think you're gonna need someone who's really in charge of public programs, and one who's maybe in charge of any kind of things that go on site, like art making and engaging with the community in another way apart from the big programming things.
Right.
So I think maybe that should be two separate, especially if engaging with the community is a big forefront of the space. You might need more than just one educator. You always need somebody who knows numbers. Because places know how to run. And curators are not known for knowing that.
Right.
No,
but that's so true.
Separate finance person. Every time I have to do any kind of budget at work, I laugh because it's going to take me more time.
Look, you and me both with the numbers. And
I feel the same way.
I feel the same way about technology, which is kind of leads me to another question. How do you feel about technology in terms of a lot of artists are moving towards new media works and digital-based work, time-based works, but even the NFTs and things like that. What do you think? Gosh. What kind of technology do you think would be essential for a space of the future, for the operations, or even just the exhibition and presentation of the works?
You always need a good projector. Any kind of video.
Everyone said projector, that's number one, right?
Yeah, any kind of video works you want to do installation, you want to have film screenings, you want to have this, you want to have that, you need a good one. You, of course, are gonna need laptops for all the staff members, unless you're gonna have everyone use their personal ones, which can get tricky because that's not necessarily all in the same kind of capability or capacity for each kind of laptops. And not everybody has one, or they have one and they bought it for $300 and it doesn't really do everything that you might need it to do at a workplace.
But nowadays, with the way the world's going, you might have to work remotely. You need everybody to have a proper device.
Right. And having them use their personal one is not necessarily a good option. And what else? Well, you need phones. What else do you need? You need good internet at whatever space that you're working in for the public to access any kind of interactive media, for your staff to work, for everything to run. What else do you need? I don't know.
And what about sound systems and stuff? I
don't know anything about that.
Do you imagine, has there been a lot?
You're gonna probably need an AV person.
Right.
Who can be in charge of that and really kind of hone in on what is really essential to run, what's at the space. It's a good thing.
And the idea of performance too. I mean, do you see performance being a larger part of the gallery or museum experience, or even the art experience these days?
I think so. Artists responding to art, you know,
Mm-hmm.
in a physical, interactive way is something that I think a lot of people really enjoy, react to. And I think it'd be really beneficial to kind of see what you're looking at in a different light, in a different media. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and just all of the different ways these things kind of work together and meld together. So yeah, I mean, performance is, the longer in this short time I've been in the contemporary art world, it's something that people really respond to, and I think can really add a lot to any kind of exhibition that you have.
Yeah.
And kind of bring out new ideas from the existing art that you didn't even really consider until you saw like kind of a physical response or interaction or reflection of it.
Right on. So actually, I'm thinking about, I think some of the other questions I had, you kind of already answered them in your responses. So I'm going to kind of move to some of the wrap up questions that I had, because we're moving through this very nicely. I thinking again about like, futurism and storytelling and world building when it comes to the work of certain artists. Like some artists' work is so futuristic, right?
Yeah.
And you can imagine, like, have people use the expression, oh, they're ahead of their time. Are there any artists that you've come across that you feel like, emerging artists or otherwise, that you feel represent kind of the direction that maybe art is headed in for the future? And then, then in turn would be artists that would require a certain kind of space to present their work.
Well, I feel like a lot of artists working now are not always just like working in one medium. And I think that is the future, not just an artist who's a painter or just a sculptor or, a photographer, like people that really work across media. And I think that really requires of your space to be more adept to kind of handle that, so not just, you think of like typical kind of museum space, you think of paintings on a wall, but I think artists are really working in modes that are much bigger than that nowadays.
Yeah.
They're working in video, they're working in installation, they're writers also, they're doing everything. And so I think your space needs to be able to accommodate all of these different modes of thinking and working and being.
The multidisciplinary artist is definitely is the future for sure. And like you said, you got to be able to accommodate all these things. That makes a lot of sense. And then when you think about your own exploration through films or literature, like, what movies or even books have you read that present a certain world of the future that you think might be possible? Like, there's so many different
really
ways.
Banking on the idea that I watch in my free time really critical things, and not the new episode of Euphoria and romance rom-coms on Netflix. You're really thinking great of me.
No, but look, I mean, well, for example, like, with me, Octavia Butler and Parable of the Sower is something that I teach in class. And so one of the reasons I teach that is because I am so concerned that we are headed there, if we're not kind of there already, with the world that she created. And the world that Octavia created was very much based on what she saw going on around her in that moment of her life, and then thinking, well, what if this continues? What if the world continues on this path? What will the future look like? And that's how she created that world of Parable of the Sower. And like I don't think they weren't going to museums in Parable of the Sower. You know what I mean? Like,
I feel like I have, especially in this pandemic time, I have for some reason also watched a lot of dystopias and all of these kind of movies of what our future could be and come to. They even made on Netflix the other day this like crazy movie about like an asteroid hitting the Earth. I don't know if you watched it.
I did, girl. Don't Look Up.
Yeah, and I watched it and I was just like, this is not even far off. This is exactly what's happening. I rewatched The Hunger Games, and there's Handmaid's Tale. I've watched all of that.
Right, Gilead.
In high school. Yeah, I read the book in high school.
What if Gilead was real? We'd have to run for the hills.
Isn't it kind of though?
Whew.
There's so many
Look,
elements. I mean, the author, when she wrote the book, she said she didn't write anything in the book that has not happened somewhere in the world,
no.
in different time periods. She did not make up any of those kinds of instances. Maybe they're exaggerated a bit, but they're all things that have taken place in real life. And I think there are all of these elements of these dystopias that are really a part of our life that people really downplay. Like, we are truly living in like a dystopian kind of horror movie, and everybody's like, it's fine.
Right? Everyone's like, yeah, carry on. We're
Yeah,
good.
people are
This is
dying.
fine.
People have long COVID. People have lost their taste and smell, two very vital functions of being a human being. Yeah, but you'll
Can you
discover it
imagine?
eventually, and it's absolutely fine. So
I'm
I
praying for
think,
that. That's one of my biggest fears is that taste and smell stuff. Lord have mercy. Some people, I have a cousin who did not get his back yet. And he had it
yeah,
months ago. Yeah, months
yeah,
ago he had it.
yeah. I
Yeah.
was watching a video on YouTube, like an interview of somebody that has long COVID and has those, still doesn't have taste and smell. They were already an underweight person. They've lost like 30 more pounds. Like, they cannot keep the weight on because they don't want to eat because the food tastes bad. They've lost their interest in it, but they're still hungry. And I'm like, this is insane. So
Oh no, that's scary. It's like, remember Bird
yeah,
Box? Did you see Bird Box,
yeah,
that
of
movie?
course. Yes.
So it's kind of like, all right, I mean, thank God we haven't gone blind, but like taste and smell is not great either. We don't
That's
want to lose that.
two.
That's two, exactly. We do, look, I know that
Two
it's
to five.
madness. It's madness, you know.
So so yeah, all of that to say, I think that
How will the
if
arts function though in a world like that, right?
in a
If
world
we
like
are
that,
headed towards this dystopian future, you know, what
we're
role
in
do
it.
you
Keep
see?
going.
Right. So like if we keep going down this road, right, this dystopian road, what role do you think the arts will play or art spaces will play in a future like that?
I think it's two-sided. It's a reprieve, it's therapeutic, but it's also kind of a reconciliation, like kind of working, using art as a way to work through issues and reacting to issues, but also art does not always have to be critical. It can be beautiful, and that can be something that's a gift in itself.
I love
Everything does not need to push forward for a way to fix the world and kind of talk about society's larger problems. It can also just be a very beautiful thing, and that can provide kind of peace and happiness in a person, and that should not be downplayed either. So
I love
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Thank you, Alexis, for that's right. Art can just be
yeah,
beautiful, and maybe that's
yeah.
all we
That's
need, you
enough
know.
sometimes.
Some beauty in the world, especially in a
Yeah,
dystopia. Beauty
yeah,
is it would be essential, wouldn't it?
yeah, yeah.
To keep us going. Well, look, so I have kind of one more question before I
Okay,
wrap up, because I have another interview at 3, but I wanted to ask you this kind of off the record.
okay.
As you know, this is like just my first round. You're my third interview. I have about like 6 interviews in this first round. And then from there, you know, I'm getting kind of like recommendations or thoughts from folks in terms of other people I might reach out to. Is
Okay.
there anyone that comes to mind for
Oh
you?
yeah. If you haven't already spoken to TK Smith,
No.
um, oh yeah, talk to him. Brilliant.
Okay. No,
He's in
where's TK
Philadelphia.
based? I don't know
He's in
TK.
Philadelphia. You should know him. You should meet
Yeah,
him.
why
You would
his
love
name
him.
sounds so familiar. TK Smith.
Because you've probably seen him on things.
Yeah,
He just won
probably.
that big writers grant from the Andy Warhol Foundation.
Oh
So he was on
wow,
some
cool.
list you've seen recently, probably. Yeah, he's Philadelphia based. He is a curator. He's very interdisciplinary. And he works a lot in the gallery spaces and kind of all of these kind of
Like
pop-up.
logistics and stuff.
Yeah, and he, like you, is a freelance guru, just always doing everything everywhere.
I
So
love that.
yeah,
Okay,
I will
TK
send you his
Smith.
info. Yeah.
Yes, great. And if anyone else comes to mind, please feel free to email me. Also, too, I'll be following up. Do you have a W-9, like a 2022 W-9 you could send me?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, when you get a chance, because basically, I will most likely be connecting you with someone from the village who will then be processing everything. The payments
Okay.
won't be coming through from me directly, but I want to make sure that, you know, at least we get the W-9 in the mix.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know if you're
That's
going to need
easy.
an invoice, but I'll double check on that and I'll be following up with you shortly.
Okay.
But yeah, you know, we Also, we'll probably follow up because once we get the interviews done and we kind of get a sense of the content and the resonant ideas and visions and thoughts from people, we're going to try to consider what container or like format we're going to use to present this information, because we do want it to be made public. It's primarily going to support this process for the immediate village community as they move closer to kind of executing this design. But at the same time, we want to share this process with the general public. And so most likely it's going to be presented on site at the village construction site and just on the campus somewhere. And we'd love to get, folks in, feedback on how we might best do that. So you might hear from me again soon. But in the meantime, gosh, it's so good to see your face and
so good to
just hear all the wonderful things you're up to. You're just doing so well.
Busy
you
in
are.
A good way. In a good way. Basically we're about to do this huge expansion in 2023 that's supposed to open in like 2025. So I'm working on with another curator at the museum a traveling show of like all the greatest hits of the collection, so it can go on the road and people can see it like the Studio Museum did the other day. The best of.
And they also did that with the Barnes when they did the 30 Americans with
exactly just like that.
So no, I think that's brilliant, and I'm so excited for you. I can't wait to just hear the next thing that you're doing, because you stay on top of it. And thank you for spending this MLK Day with me and making time on your day off. You're wonderful. Much love to you. Stay safe out there and keep dodging.
I will.
Keep
same to you.
Yes.
I haven't gotten it, and hopefully I never get it.
I know. Let's cross those fingers, girl. Take care.
And I'll send you TK's information. I might just send you his Instagram because that's probably easy.
Oh no, that'd be great. Yeah, because I don't know. So yeah, please do. And I appreciate that. Okay. Thank you.
Bye.